back to season 3, yeah, with a dwellers below, dwellers below.
We're back. Back. It's the Dwellers Below once again, and we finally start doing things in one take, and I immediately forget how to speak English. I'm Nick, the father of lies. Joining me today, top right corner, David War.
Hello. Yep, David Wall below me. Chris Cousins.
Oh, that's below me on my screen is Nick Gentili, which is far more exciting. But hey, everyone.
Yeah, it was definitely meant to be Nick Gentili.
I never left. I've literally been here the entire time.
Just waiting for the opportunity for the camera to turn on again. And
That's right. That's right.
If you-
As you can
if
see, I'm
you-
in the same t-shirt.
If you power stance for like 3 weeks, do you swap legs or just single leg power stance the whole time?
No, it's only the left leg.
Did you spend any of that time to paint your griff prints, mate?
Oh boy. Oh boy. This is very less exciting than it was in previous seasons. Because in fact, he is the Prince and the Griffin in combination are 100% done.
Get out of here.
But the base is not done because I haven't worked out my new basing scheme. So he's still probably, how much is a base in percentage wise? 0.7. So he's 99.3% done.
That might be
Do
a
you want to see
record.
him?
Yeah, sure. If you can get it into focus.
Caca, caca.
Oh, very nice.
So that's him.
awesome.
So he has a twin brother who is for my double griff list. So I'm going to take off this flag and put a proper like standard on there so he can be the BSB.
I quite like the double griffin list. I think it's fun.
Yeah, it looks really good. I'm kind of toying with some what I call cheap and nasty lists where you kind of don't take any magic items or very few.
Yeah.
And you just go heaps of stuff. Sorry, I was sitting on my cord. Yeah, so you just go heaps of stuff, and 2 Pure of Heart Griffins gives you like your whole army is leadership 9 or leadership 10 if you go 2 lords. It's pretty nuts because they get the 18-inch bubble, and Pure of Heart lets you use your BSB's command range. And there's no other like exciting honors that you would put on a Griffin. If you could make your Griffin rider the Blood of Calidor, then I would think about that because turns it into weapon skill 7 or weapon skill 8 and gives
Makes
them
sense
3
from a
armor.
fluff perspective.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. But the Blood of Calidor I really like on a wizard because it lets you give your level 4 a 2+ save, and he can sit in your cavalry bus, and he goes up to weapon skill 5 and gets 2 attacks with it. It's pretty nuts. It's lots of cool, fun, like thematic stuff you can do with that army list. It's very fun.
I love this new Nick Gentili. He's painted his cav prints and he's going straight into like the deep dive. Like it's all content with this guy.
Oh, I'm just a walking reel of content.
Well,
Sure.
this episode is what everyone's been crying out for. It's the 3-hour High Elf Army Book special.
That's right.
So we thought we'd bring Nick Gentili in and talk nothing. But no, we're not talking about High Elves. No one cares about High Elves. High Elves suck. We're talking about the big bad. The big bad in the Warhammer world today. And
Would
Nick's
you
alluded to
say-
it previously. It's griffins. It's
Would you
large
say
flying
that
griffins.
it has us in a griff of panic?
No,
No.
you wouldn't.
Would you say it's dragging the community down?
I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. You would? I'm waiting for Egg to come in with some puns. He's normally good for a few.
Yeah, sorry. I've been really busy printing terrain, so I haven't been able to actually come up with any puns. So, for example, I printed this forest and a building.
Yeah.
Got the old Epsom laser jet out. It's been great, and you can print like 30 pieces of terrain in about a minute. I think this is going to really change the way we approach tournament gaming.
I mean, I did print a lot of tables worth of terrain for CanCon one year because they realized 2 days before the event that they didn't have any terrain.
I
For
remember
those
that year.
listening at home who didn't see that visual gag, I held up pieces of paper with the like forest printed on it in a black outline with the word forest.
It gets funnier when you describe it. Actually,
Yeah, would you like me to describe the building as well?
yes.
All right, so it's like a square mostly with a little rectangle and two other squares with a cross across them, and then a triangle on top.
The question
That
is,
costs $2 million in outer
does-
Melbourne.
yeah, question is, there's a block line of sight.
Yeah.
All right, enough jokes. With Nick
Definitely
having-
not enough jokes. Definitely not.
With
There
Nick
definitely
having
needs to be more jokes.
with Nick having finished his Cav Prince, I figure I better step in the void because I've also been doing a little bit of hobby. I've got my own little Chaos Prince here, so
I'm just
he's
looking real
he's
close.
he's a Chaos Cav Prince, so he's about 83% done. So there's a bit to go there.
Yeah.
So I look forward to the next episode where he'll be 84% done because I'm really not getting any fucking hobby done whatsoever.
It's because of the trim. That trim's so annoying on new
It's
chaos.
a
There's
lot of trim.
so much trim.
I blame Chris for pressuring me into doing a slow grow campaign and committing to paint shit, and we all knew that was never going to work.
Mm.
Well,
What do you mean? I've painted like 40 orcs and 5 cavalry this month.
40 fucking.
yeah,
I spent more time working on the fluff for my army than I did painting.
I've done
My
about
secret-
25 free company, 10 cavalry, a couple of characters as well.
You two disgust me. Where
Well,
do you find
it's-
all this
it's
time to
like-
paint?
Well, I was going to say my secret is not having children, but Dave has both children and paints like a machine. So
Gentilly, they're academics. They don't have real jobs.
Oh, of course.
No, the trick is just to destroy your sleep and health by staying up until late, drinking tea and painting models when you know that you're going to have to wake up at 5 a.m. with a screaming 1-year-old.
Oh, see, that's my problem. I go to bed early, knowing that I'll be up at 5 a.m.
Yeah. All right, no. The true topic today, we're talking dragons. We're talking the big bad of the Warhammer Old World. They're fast. They seem to kill everything in your army. And it seems like nothing kills them because it used to be back in the day that, you know, they had 6 wounds and they were tough, but like one well-placed cannonball and that was it, 600 points down the drain. But
Or 30 white lions.
what did we work out? It takes like 13 cannonball shots or something to kill most of these dragons.
Well, to kill the toughest of the dragons, yeah.
So, and that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about like the big bad dragons. We're not talking about griffins. We're not talking about wyverns. We're not talking about little like mages on sun dragons. Like, we want to talk about? What are you going to do if you see a Tomb King on a dragon, a Star Dragon, a Chaos Lord on a dragon? What are you going to do if one of them is on the other side of the table to you? Because they look like they're going to be popular. They could almost be ubiquitous. It's pretty early to tell. I don't know if there's any. Is there any stats or anything on lists that we've got yet? But they look pretty good. And frankly, this episode could be really short because I think the answer is just print your own dragon.
Yeah.
Or train your
and-
own dragon.
And so many armies actually have them, right? Like, obviously not all of them do, but you've got dark elves, you've got high elves, you've got wood elves, you've got vampires, you've got tomb kings, you've got chaos warriors. Like, it's a decent chunk, unfortunately, of armies that can bring their own dragon. And I think when the most obvious answer to your enemy's dragon is your own dragon, that means we're probably going to see a whole lot of them for the next 6 months or so at least.
I know I'll be dragging mine along.
Are we underestimating the scale of the problem? Long, awkward pause in relation to my.
No, I got it. It was funny because Scales on Dragons.
yeah,
I was
sorry,
just
my,
leaving it alone.
internet was wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the
blame
internet.
it. Blame it on your internet. It wasn't.
yes.
It wasn't my horrendous joke.
Look, I think the sting in the tail. Actually, it's only wyverns that have stings in their tails, right?
Dragons have fork tails, bro.
Yeah. So what can tip the scales against the dragon?
That's
you know-
probably better.
My plan is just to wing it.
Everyone's in a bit of a
I'm
flap.
out. I'm out.
Dave's in a bit of a flap.
I literally, Chris, you're copying my material, my man.
Sorry, it's just fire.
So, just to be clear for the listeners, because I'm not sure if they know the difference between what actually constitutes a dragon. A dragon is a big, scaly monster, often breathing some kind of breath weapon, like noxious fumes or flames. But it has 4 legs. It has hind legs and 4 legs and wings. So, if you
4
watched
legs or
Game of
4 arms?
Thrones, well, I'd have to ask my vet friends, but I think they're 4 legs, right? Because they still walk around on their legs. But if you watched Game of Thrones, Khaleesi is actually not the mother of dragons. She's the mother of wyverns because they didn't have forearms.
Well, we're not
They
talking about
only had
wyverns today.
wings. No, we're talking about dragons.
This is the kind of on-topic content I was hoping for you, mate. Just swipes at a 10-year-old shit TV show for its inaccurate nomenclature for its flying lizards.
Exactly. Are they actually lizards or are they mammals?
Dragons.
Yeah.
They lay eggs, bro.
Yeah, but so do echidnas, and they're mammals.
And so do platypi.
Sure. So they could be.
Who knows what a platypus is?
Maybe they're marsupials. Do you think that a dragon's a marsupial?
I do not. I do not think the dragon is a marsupial, Nick. Because isn't marsupials animals that keep their young in a pouch, whereas it's monotremes that are the ones that lay eggs, mammals that lay eggs?
Yeah, maybe they're
Honestly-
monotremes. That's what I meant.
If dragons are marsupials, I think they're not even a problem because I ran over a kangaroo the other day and bam, done. Sorted.
You're a monster.
It's only a small hole in my car.
Oh, that's
Well,
So
So
you're
we'll-
saying we just need to drive a car across the gaming table to get rid of this
If
dragon?
you run over your opponent's dragon in your VW Golf, then that will kill it.
Do you think dragon tastes like crocodile? Because if it tasted like kangaroo, I would definitely eat it. But if it tastes like crocodile, I'm out.
Have you eaten crocodile? Crocodile does taste like chicken, right? It's just stringy chicken.
Kind of
it's kind of
fishy. Yeah,
fishy chicken.
yeah, not a fan.
I like chicken.
Mm.
I
I've
like it
tried
to
it.
not be fishy.
I'd try dragon.
Yeah,
I
that
think
is
if
true.
you get the sauce right, it'll probably be all right, no matter what the meat is, right?
Mm.
Just,
Yeah. Do you think it's one of those meats that you need to cook completely, or is it one of those meats that you can eat rare?
Well, it's going to depend on the
Dragon.
dragon too. Like your bone dragon's going to be like a jerky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it does depend on the dragon. I don't probably want to dive into a Nurgle dragon anytime soon, but I reckon you could have like wood elf dragon sashimi or something like that.
Yeah. Sounds pretty clean and delicious.
Yeah, but if they've got like noxious breath and venom, you'd probably want to make sure it's fully cooked and also carefully prepared. You don't want to
Yeah,
accidentally.
you need one of those special chefs, like the ones that have the license to cut up the puffer fish.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, though. We're assuming we've killed the dragon.
Yeah.
Dave, how do we kill the dragon? Give me. What do you do? You got a dragon on the other side of the board. What are you doing about it?
Can we step back a bit? What is the issue with a dragon?
Stepping back from me stepping. Well, they said at the start they're fast, they kill everything, and nothing kills them. Like,
But what is
Yeah.
it in the core rules that like is particularly egregious for these guys? Because they are behemoths, right? So they work like a heavy chariot, which means they get to turn at the end of their movement, correct?
As long as they don't march.
what's particularly egregious is they gave them combined profiles, which means they get a huge wounds characteristic, and they let them use the armor save of the rider and the save of the rider. So instead of what we used to have, which was you'd have an elf rider on a dragon, and the elf rider might have a 2-up armor save and a ward save and a regen, and he'd have his 3 wounds, but then the dragon itself would have 6 wounds and just a 3-up armor. Like, not entirely unkillable. Now the dragon has 9 or 10 wounds and has a 2-up armor save and has a 5-up regen and has a 5-up ward save. So the dragons themselves, while they used to be Like they were always fast, they always killed everything, but they're now super, super durable because they have massive wound characteristics, high toughness. You can't just choose to attack the elf or go, oh, the elf's got a good save, but I've got high strength, I'll hit the dragon, or I'm low strength, so I'm going to attack the elf and trying to just get more wounds through and make him roll more saves. You're attacking the toughness 6 no matter what, and it's got 9 or 10 wounds, and it's got a 2 up, 5 up, 5 up, and like, what do you even do, bro? So that combined with the fact that unless you've got unit strength like 19 or 20 after you beat a dragon in combat, it's in all likelihood, because they're high leadership, just going to fall back in good order.
Yeah.
At which point it gets a reform, and if you don't catch it, it just flies off, or it just charges you again. Or if you do catch it, you have to just keep fighting it, because you can't even just break it and run it down unless you have a big unit. And if you have that big unit, is the dragon even going to fight you? Because we just talked about how fast the thing is, right? So,
and not just fast, it has fly and it has large targets, so it can charge over units. It's one of the only units in the game which is able to ignore intervening units for line of sight. So they're extremely hard to hide from. So that combination of unkillable, actually very good damage output. Like most of them have D6 stomps. They have 4 or 5, 6 attacks on the dragon, another 3 or 4 attacks on the rider, and it kind of just adds up enough where even in a challenge they can usually still win combat against most ranked units and things like that. They're very impressive.
Well, that D6 stomp almost works like static combat res, right? Because they have their attacks and their wounds and whatever, and then they get that extra D6, which is going to be most of the times 3 or at least 3. And then that's probably 2+ wounds. So even if you've got 2 ranks and a banner, it's like, okay, I just got those extra wounds from my stomp.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's worth remembering as well, like we didn't have the stomps in 6th and 7th edition. That came in 8th edition because they were also trying to encourage units of 40 with stubborn and horde formations. And so we got thunder stomps to balance that out a bit. Now we don't have those giant units for the most part. The rules don't really encourage that, but we still have the huge damage output for the dragons.
And you can stomp anything. Like it's not limited to infantry anymore, right? So, stepping back from. Oh yeah, you go, Chris.
Just as well for the stomps, you get to do them regardless now, even if you kill the champion in a challenge. You can still do the stomps to inflate your combat res afterwards.
Stepping back from the stepping back, Chris, you are renowned in Australian Warhammer circles for just flying large, like using a lot of flying monsters and dragons in particular. I think you won the Masters with a Wood Elf dragon list, and you've piloted dragons for years. For the listeners, like if you've got a dragon and you're using a dragon against an inexperienced opponent, like how much of an opponent's army do you think you could kill in a dragon if they don't treat it with respect and play it right?
Still a bit of unfamiliarity with how easily you can sort of get through and get out of combats in the new edition, but potentially their entire army, depending on how it's constructed, or at least near enough of it, you can pretty reasonably kill a unit or break it, make it flee off the table, reform, do the same again, especially if you're also tagging other units to pin them in place ready for when the dragon arrives, or you can pursue with the cavalry unit that went in with the dragon while the dragon moves on to the next target. So if you're not careful, the dragon, especially with the number of combat reforms that you can get now, the dragon can potentially charge 4 or 5 times in a game, and each time potentially kill a unit.
Well, it's funny because my immediate thought on reading the rules and reading the army lists and that sort of thing was like, hey, I think, and this was without any discussion at all with anyone, was like, hey, I actually think big monsters and ridden monsters are a thing, which definitely weren't in my previous play, right? Is like that was my immediate thought, that you put an elf on a griffin or a dragon, they get the toughness boost, and the way that combat res works, you almost don't even need a magic weapon, right? Because if you break them in combat, even if they fall back in good order, you count as charging again. So something like a lance is almost good enough because of the armor piercing and the armor bane. And I think I don't know if it's intentional. I certainly like it. The reason I used to like 8th edition Warhammer and Warhammer Forever was because it's a fantasy setting, and I like magic and monsters and those sorts of things in the game. But I like it from a general design point of view, not a competitive point of view. That dragons and monsters are something that are good and that you are going to see a lot on the table because it's a fantasy setting, and that's what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to throw it back to Dave. So Chris over here has said he's going to kill his whole army, your whole army with his dragon. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what can you do to stop that from happening, basically. And we're going to get down into the detail of it, but we don't want to just talk about like specific things that one army can do. So we're not going to talk about, just have a Tomb Scorpion, and the Tomb Scorpion can just pop up and charge it and heroic killing blow it, or monster slay it with the Scorpion. Like, that's great if you play Tomb Kings and you have Scorpions and you get the Scorpion into the dragon. Like, great, we've just solved it for everyone. Hooray. No, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to talk strategies and play styles and that kind of stuff. Like, what can you think about when you're building a list? What can you think about on the table against? And so I'm going to throw to Dave. You're sitting up against Chris. He's got his big flying. He's got a high elf Star Dragon. It's got a 2-up armor. It's got a 5-up ward. It's got a 5-up regen. What's going through your mind?
And so actually, before we do that, it's got a 2-up armor, 5-up ward, 5-up regen. What is its name, and where in Ulthuan is it from?
No, that's park that and take that to the Slow Grow episode, which is the next episode. That's where we name our characters, and that's where we do our fluff.
So when I'm facing off against Calandris, Bestrider of the Cosmos, so I think the first decision actually is, and I mean this really significantly, is like, are you actually going to try and kill the dragon? Because I think for a lot of games, especially if you're playing in a tournament setting, which is a 20-0 tournament setting, you might want to make a decision about whether you're actually going to try and kill the dragon at all, or whether you're going to try and win a small win by not engaging the dragon itself directly and trying to touch the other units in the army. This is more viable if you've got an army that either has very strong shooting, which is pretty hard to do in this edition, or lots of mobility and can feed at small things. Or you might decide that you are going to cop a small loss, which is not a fun place to be. But I actually think for some armies, particularly really infantry-heavy horde armies, that you can not let the dragon do what it wants, but feed it units that it won't be able to get its points back off. Because these dragons, when it's a Chaos Dragon, you're looking at 600 and something points at least. Tomb King Dragon's a little bit cheaper, but the Elf Dragons, the Chaos Dragons, you can be putting in, a third of your
7.
Yeah, into that. So one thing that I've been thinking about quite a bit with, say, a Vampire Counts army, I think this also works with Tomb Kings. I think this also works to an extent with Demons of Chaos, is you set up defensively, and you set up units that you are happy for the dragon to get into and make it difficult because of placement for it to get into other units. So there's a few things that allow this to happen. The first one is the way that breaking from combat works in the current edition means that if your unit gives ground but doesn't fall back in good order, the dragon will not get a chance to reform. It has to either go into you or sit right behind you. Dragons don't have 360-degree vision. They're not skirmishers. And if you've got things like units that can hold that combat, so there's a long list of the units that can probably do this, but zombies, skeletons, tougher demon units, you let it get through a few units through the game and try and engage the other things, basically. So I think for me, that's the first way, but that might be too depressing for other people, where you sort of just say, like, I'm not touching a third of their army.
But on the plus side,
yeah, go, Chris.
You get to touch the other 2/3 of their army with all of yours, while the dragon is dealing with 100 or 200 points at a time. If you can leverage that sort of, in Magic we might call it a tempo advantage. If you can leverage the fact that you're going to have higher force concentration while the dragon is bogged down. It won't be forever. Then potentially you can sort of break their army whilst the dragon is still chewing through the first couple of units. And even if it ends up killing more of its points, if you've leveraged the advantage you get well enough, then there's a chance to win the game, even whilst having the mindset of never even trying to take the dragon off the table.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry, I think that plays into a point about what I wanted to raise from what Dave said, was that. So Dave said, and I think the line was like, you feed it stuff and don't let it kill its points or get its points back, which is an interesting fallacy in that, like, I've heard people talk about this where they say, I didn't let that unit kill its points worth. If every unit in your enemy army, kills its points worth, you've just lost 20-0 because they're killing essentially 2,000 points of their army is killing 2,000 points of your army. So what's important from that is if you feed stuff to that dragon and you go, well, it didn't kill its points worth. He's got a 700 point dragon. It only killed 500 points worth of stuff. If you don't capitalize on that, and this is where what Chris said comes in, if you don't capitalize on that, you're going to just lose by that 500 points, right? Because you're not killing that dragon in that scenario.
Yeah.
But it's a way of sort of mitigating the damage, as you said, and then it feeds into exactly what Chris said, which was, you've tied up this dragon, you've contained it. It's not going to kill. It's only killing 300-400 points worth of your army. That gives you that 1,600 points of your army. You've got to go use that advantage, right, and get that over there and try and have it set up so that you can attack the enemy army, right?
But you're not getting the points for the dragon in that case, right? So you've actually got to pretty much not lose much else while you wipe the rest of their army. If we're talking about winning the game, right, or going for a close loss, you've got to use your, let's say, 1,500 points to beat their 1,300 points without actually taking much more damage from that.
Yeah, it's about creating that differential, right? So the slower you can make that dragon chew through your stuff and the less points you can feed it, the more points you've then got to create a differential to the rest of their army, because they might only have 1,300 points of army. So if you can create that differential, particularly earlier on in the game, you're gonna have a decent chance of essentially outrunning the dragon.
Has anyone done any analysis or worked out how efficient a dragon needs to be? Like how many points it needs to get, how quickly to roll on and win the game? So, for example, by turn 2, it needs to have killed 300 points and blah, blah, blah to enable you to cascade on to win the game. Whereas if you can hold it at bay until, let's say, turn 4, then it becomes much less likely that it's going to win the game for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there's an answer, but the game is time limited, and the game is time limited in the sense that there's only 6 turns in this game? 6 turns?
Yeah.
There's only 6 turns. The dragon can't generally charge in the first turn. Hot tip: if you go first against a dragon, don't just walk forward and give it a first turn charge. Bad idea. That's probably tip number 1. Every turn that it's not in combat and not killing a unit is a win for you, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a broad sort of topic we've got here, which we've just kind of walked into, is slowing it down, right? So slowing it down with what Dave said was tar pit units, slowing it down with unit champions. Unit champions is something I want to talk about. They're cheap now. Dragons, if they go in on their own, you can challenge them out. They're not going to break your unit, because if you've got unit strength more than 5 or more, they're not going to double you, and they're not going to stop you from falling back in good order. So if the dragon has to just every turn, just in the first turn of every combat, essentially charge in, even if you've just got a small unit of light cav, if you've got a unit of marauder horse, your marauder horse with a champion, if there's 5 of them, they charge in, they'll win the combat by heaps, but they're only killing that champion model, and then your unit will fall back in good order, automatically rally, and then they can choose to go back in, or they can choose to try and fly off and kill something else. But if they do that, all they've killed is one model, and they've dedicated a turn of the game to do that.
So there are some risks associated with that, though, because when you're getting charged by a dragon, you take a terror check if you're not immune to psychology. Terra checks in this edition don't get BSB rerolls, so that's a risk that you just run. The second thing is Terra causes.
Veteran does right though.
Sorry,
Veteran rerolls Terra, doesn't it?
Yeah, veteran does. I think it's all leadership tests with that.
Yeah.
But
your small cheap units don't have veteran, right?
aren't going to have that. And the other one is that Terra drops your leadership by 1 in close combat. So you're often taking leadership checks, which again, not all armies, like high elves are rocking around with leadership 10, dwarves are. Lots of armies are stuck with 9 now. And suddenly that goes to an 8. You got to reroll. It's not a sure thing. So there are risks there.
But even those armies, even elves and dwarves, they don't have as ready access to leadership 9 and 10 as they used to. Like a lot of the line units used to be leadership 9. That's not the case anymore. And wizards are only leadership 8. So, and I'm sure it's the same for dwarves, that it's not as good as it used to be. So that -1 is more powerful than it reads.
But at the same time, the dragon is not going to want to go into those tar pits and will be looking for other options. So Calandris, the ever-chosen Lord of the Forest of Trace, is going to try to avoid the sort of obvious targets, the obvious traps, and is going to be probably, if I'm whispering in its ear, making a beeline for whichever unit has several of your characters in, because they can't afford to flee off the board. If we get stuck and we're grinding out a combat there, we can start allocating attacks on characters and picking up points. And that denies the opportunity for you to go and kill the rest of my army whilst the dragon is getting bogged down. So I guess what can we do to prevent a dragon from just charging the units where our characters are?
I would ask a wizard to make me a sword. And I would ask him to imbue that sword with magical monster slaying energy.
Well, that's just the answer, right? Like everyone gets a monster slaying sword, and you just put that on your Captain of the Empire with 2 attacks, and
that's right.
Done.
Sorted.
And on average, you hit with 1 of those attacks. So every 6 times you try it, you'll get a monster slay off, and then half of those, the attack will go through and not get saved. So if you're lucky,
not if you roll good.
1 every 12 games, you might kill a dragon.
just roll better.
Just roll good.
If you don't die first.
I'm going to read this out. Let's see where it is. Is it in the Empire list?
No, it doesn't exist.
He's prepared a reading for the show, and he doesn't even have the reading.
Well, moving on.
So there are a lot of ways that you can increase the potency of the monster slaying sword. The Old World Fanatics did a really deep dive on some of these things, but getting things like Hatred or a Paymaster's Coin to get rerolls to hit, deciding which unit you put it on. Don't put it on a unit with poison, because they'll do auto wounds with their hits rather than...
No, you can ignore that. No, you can ignore the poison.
All right.
Yeah, so the FAQ,
Cool.
a really interesting FAQ that I've not seen a lot of people talking about. Basically, I don't have it here, so I won't do a reading. The gist of it was, I think the question was, if you've got poison and armor bane, how do you work it out? And they basically said you can choose to ignore the poison and go for the armor bane. So I can only assume that also holds true for heroic killing blow and killing blow, right?
Cool. So like a Strigoi Ghoul King with a monster slaying sword is going to be much more likely to be successful than an Empire Wizard with it. But so if you would like the ultra deep dive on that, the Old World Fanatics do try to work out whether or not we can kill a dragon, and the answer is sometimes if you roll a 6, and there's ways to increase the likelihood of that happening.
Some of the times it works, all of the time. No, shout out to the Old World Fanatics. Those guys, we met some of them up in CanCon. They are very cool dudes. They've put on a good show. Keen to make some content with them and play some games with them at some point. So shout out to
Are
those
there
guys.
any Australian Old World players who don't have a podcast?
No. If you have a phone, you have a podcast in this day and age. So
it's a prerequisite for playing miniatures games is you also need to have equipment and do a podcast.
I mean, I think we've I think we've released more podcast episodes than cumulatively our podcast members, all 9 of them, have played games.
Yeah, but not thought about games, and that's what matters.
Well, I would say some of us have played more games than others.
Yes.
The ones in the UK, I think, have played more than the rest of you Aussies in total.
Yeah, but you
game
got the
didn't
rules
get
before
released
us.
for like
4
a
months
month.
earlier.
Exactly. Still haven't finished reading the book.
So I have 2 plans. Plan number 1
Here we go.
is just make friends with it, so you don't have to fight it.
Right.
Becomes a friendly dragon, not a problem. Plan number 2 is what I call cheap and nasty, and that's actually writing a list that goes the opposite way. So you're spending 700 points on a dragon. I'm making everything in my army as cheap as possible and just spamming it. And then similar to your plan, Dave, I don't know if this will work, but similar to your plan, kind of trade up. So my current cheap and nasty list has 4 characters. It's got a BSB on a horse and 2 Griff nobles and a level 4, but they're all really kitted out quite mundanely, and then you just maximize the troops. And it's mostly, this list that I wrote is mostly cav, right? So yeah, the dragon can chase you, but everything in your army is really fast, and then you can almost in an MSU style use that to kind of get advantages in other areas and break some units, and before it's had a chance to make points on you, you're across the board chasing stuff, killing stuff.
And you're not putting all of your expensive characters in units that can let the dragon get sort of extra value out of engaging that unit. You know, you can deploy your mage out of a unit until the dragon commits, or possibly even for the whole game. One of the things you used to try to do was keep your characters in near unit champions so the dragon couldn't get them. But now that the dragon can just stack up all its combat res, that's no longer, I think, the right way to approach it.
So it's an interesting theory, and like you say, spread the characters out, make sure that there's no big point sinks for it to get value out of, and just try and win quicker.
Yeah, I think we've sort of spoken about a very passive way of dealing with the dragon, and if you're gonna if that's going to be your plan of trying to reduce its efficiency, its efficacy, and try and just slow it down, you've got to make that plan and commit to it early. So we've talked about the approach to the game, and that approach has to start from turn 1, but it also has to start from list building. Some lists just aren't going to be able to do it. If your list isn't designed in a sense that it can feed these chaff units and it's fast, or like Nick's list, and it's fast enough to avoid the dragon. If you can't do that, if you haven't thought about that from list building, it's possible that's just not going to work, because some lists it is just going to go straight for that character. I played with a Tomb King Dragon against vampires the other week, and my opponent didn't have a list that was set up with enough chaff stuff, and I was able to just basically run the dragon up the middle and say, I don't care about most of your army. I will fight anything. So you've that's an approach you've got to take from the start. But
so be honest though, because you actually said to your opponent before the game that you weren't bringing a dragon.
I did.
Mind you,
it was a friendly gaming day, and I'm like,
and being the father of lies, it's almost like you went to Loon and bought him an almond croissant and then ate that almond croissant before giving it to him.
No one.
This is a very Melbourne-specific reference. That's not going to make sense to anyone.
It's a Melbourne-specific reference. It's an in-joke about an in-person event that we went to on the weekend. Congratulations, Lockie.
Yes.
That no one will understand or appreciate.
Except for me, when I listen back, which is never.
To your actual point, Nick, I mean, I think this is very scary I think my ogres really are terrified of the dragon for that reason, because they don't have good mechanisms to keep their expensive characters and units away from it. And it can pick up a lot of points on them when it gets in. And that is quite terrifying. I think Wood Elves as well also have some okay responses to it, but they still have lots of squishy points that it can be very aggressive with. And I do think sometimes the way to respond to a dragon is realize that you're going to lose the game and mitigate it, But
Print your own dragon.
yeah. Well, that's right. But again, I think with for example, if you're trying to feed it things,
Epson inkjet printer go
you need to work out, for example, how do you keep it so that it can't get into the zone where your expensive characters are, and that, for example, I suspect often with vampires and Tomb King armies is not going to involve you sitting in the corner and completely bunching up, because that gives it too much control over what it gets into. It's actually about aggressively trying to push up your chaffing units so that it struggles to get where it needs to be without being at risk of being charged by something small and tied down.
Dave, it's like we've done this before, because the very next thing I was about to say was we've talked about how to passively sort of approach the dragon on the other side of the board, and I wanted to flip it around and say, how can we pressure the dragon a little bit? What can we do to try and dictate the game? Because I personally, as my play style is, I like to ask questions of my opponent. I don't like to play super reactively. So what can we do to pressure the dragon? I think that's what you've said there is a really good point, and it goes a little bit to Nick's army that he mentioned as well. Is if you've got some mobile units that you can push, particularly, let's say you have two mobile sort of hammer units of cavalry. If you can push them on opposite sides of the board, you know that dragon's going to go after one of them, but you're fast enough that you might be able to sneak past it or back away from it and slow it down. But it's not going to be able to just flip from one to the other if you're spread out and you're attacking some oblique angles. So what else can you do to try and that kind of goes to what we talked about before of slow the dragon down and kill the rest of the army. But what else can you do to kind of put that pressure back on?
Silence indicates that nothing.
Just
bring your own dragon.
Just die.
So one thing that you can do is threaten a dragon with static combat resolution between ranks, a war banner, a battle standard, and really importantly, a tanky character. Yeah. You can make it so that a dragon probably can't actually win the first round or two of combat that it fights against the place where all your points are. So this is like the opposite of what I was saying before. Rather than having your characters out of units and minimizing point sinks, you pile all of your characters into a unit with all of the static combat resolution in the world. The dragon probably doesn't want to go there because, if it knows it's going to be losing a couple of rounds of combat by 2 or 3, then those are some shaky leadership tests. As we were saying, some dragons, Chaos Dragons only looking at leadership 9. They don't want any of that. So you can put units together that a dragon won't want to fight and then start zoning it. So you can work out how far can that unit that the dragon doesn't want to fight move. You can set up, obviously your unit can't cover as much area as the dragon, so then you need to have other units, say with unit champions, that can take the dragon charge, hold it not immediately in place but in a similar area for a turn or two to give your big static combat res a chance to get into the dragon. And once you get there, especially if you've got some leadership penalties, Spirit Leech or a Screaming Skull Catapult lands nearby or whatever it might be, you can threaten the dragon if it does commit. And you can also, in doing so, preserve your points because it's not going to want to commit to the place where you've got your characters. So, like, sort of the opposite approach, but if the dragon gets caught by that unit, there's a decent chance that it gets broken. And if you can combine that big infantry block with a unit of fast cavalry, then you can potentially catch it when it breaks.
And I mean, it's very difficult to give dragons rerolls, right? So it's not that unreasonable that it has a slightly below average combat round, only does 3 or 4 wounds instead of 6 or 8 wounds, and suddenly it's a whole extra round that you've held it in place, potentially breaking it, etc., etc. So it's not. I don't think they're unbeatable. I just think that the prospect of them is scarier than the reality. So it becomes a big bad in the meta because everyone's like, dragons, they're going to eat your whole army. But I don't know that it plays out like that every time.
Well done, Nick. You've summarized why we're doing this episode.
I mean, the challenge there is still that the dragon most likely is going to fall back in good order often, because
Not
you
if
need
you've
at
got the
least-
unit strength.
if you've got 20 unit strength still in,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, this is what you need. You need to have 20 unit strength and a very tough character and a unit of fast cavalry in combat with the thing, and the character survive. Then you've got a decent chance of running it down. But that's it does work, but it's a lot of moving bits, you know. Like
You don't even need the character to survive. If it takes 2 or 3 wounds and you've got enough combat resolution
That
there to
might be
break
enough.
the dragon,
yeah,
yeah,
that might be enough.
yeah.
I think
And you
it's,
can do
I
that
think
with
it's also
cavalry as well, especially heavy cav.
Yeah, I think it's super
Sure,
valid
sure.
in a sense as well that you can tie up a lot of points that the dragon can't kill. So like we've talked about how the issue with the dragon is it's 700 points that you can't kill. But if you've got a big unit of 25 guys with a BSB and even your level 4 and a hero in there, if you've created a sufficiently strong unit that dragon can't go into it, that's going to be very hard for your opponent to get, and that's something that you can then use to bully the dragon around the table a little bit. So it goes to, again, sort of putting that pressure on the dragon. And you can pressure a dragon and you might not ever kill it because they are so fast, right? The player using the dragon is unlikely to be put in situations where they don't want to be.
Yeah.
But you can give them bad choices. You can say, well, all you can kill is this 30-point unit of dogs. Alternatively, you can charge my unit of 25 marauders with all my characters in it. And so that's giving them bad choices. They're always going to have choices because it's dragon, it flies, it's a large target, as discussed. But you can give them the bad choices and put that pressure back on them. And then that's where I think things like the Dragon Slayer sword do kind of come back into it. The monster having monster killing, because you might only have that 3 or 4 attack character with it, and yeah, like a 1 in 12. I think you can get characters that are going to do it better than a 1 in 12, but you're going to have games where you might not want to commit that dragon, because if you commit that dragon and that sword goes off, like that's game over, right? Like you are just straight up dead. So you've just lost your 700-point dragon. So that's a similar way. Like you're going to play games where you're going to have the monster slaying sword, and they're going to throw the dragon in, and they're going to kill your guy, or you're not going to kill it, and they're just going to wipe your army out because they're not going to show you any respect. And a bad player will do that, and a not great player will do that. But the best players with a dragon and at a higher level of game, they're going to look at that monster slaying sword and go, okay, that's a 20% chance to kill my dragon. That's a 20% chance of them basically just losing the game if they just push in there, right? And most good players won't take that because they're going to try and work out an angle and try and get those points and win the game in a different way. So just having that guy with the monster slaying sword, sometimes it's not even about, are you going to guaranteed kill that dragon every time, but it's about using that model to deter that dragon from going against units that you don't want to lose.
I agree with the principle. I just want to disagree with the evaluation of like what the best players will do, because I think that it's a leak in a lot of people's game that they don't want the sort of feel bad of losing a game on a dice roll, so they don't put themselves in that situation. But actually, sometimes it'll be the right thing to do. If you've got an 80% chance of 20-0ing your opponent, or maybe you can hold back and scrap out an 11-9 win. The actual to maximize your expected outcome, sometimes it'll be worth risking losing the game on a dice roll. And if your aim is to do really well in a big event, that might be what you need to do. But players don't want to do it because it feels bad when it doesn't work. And so people, I think, often make the wrong calculation about how much risk they should expose themselves to in the game.
I would, in that situation,
And
I would
having
ask
one
myself,
monster slaying sword gives you the psych out.
well, I would ask myself, what would Casanova, Strider of Galaxies, Dragonborn do? And he would always charge in. But there's some gimmicky stuff you can do with like the Law of Illusion, right? Can't you do Spectral Doppelganger with, some crazy magic items? Like the High Elves have like the White Sword, which gives us monster slaying, and then you get 2d6. Is it 2d6 hits or some?
It's a good way to lose your level 4.
2d6. So Danny loves this, and I think this is not a thing, right?
Danny's an idiot.
You do
I love
2d6
Danny.
hits.
Danny paints for a reason.
Yeah, you do 2d6 with your weapon, which, for example, if your Empire could be the Mace of Hellstrom, which is d6 damage, really, really deadly.
Strength
or
10.
Strength
off.
10. Yeah. Like there's a range of items that you can use that are really good at hurting the dragon. I 100% don't think this is a thing, though. Because, like, say, ogres can do it with the tenderizer, you can do it with the Mace of Hellstrom, you can do it with the monster slaying sword. You need to be able to strike first, which even if you're charging, wizards are basically all initiative 3 or 4. And so you're not striking first, you might strike at the same time as their dragon or dragon rider. Even then, most of the time when you do the numbers on it, it's like you need to get the spell off, you need to survive, they need to let you charge them with a cavalry or infantry mage, which is probably not going to happen.
It's an assailment spell. I thought it had
Yeah.
a range. That's a shit plan.
No.
No, mate, you have to be in combat with the dragon.
And even if all that happens, it's like most of the time it doesn't work, and then you lose your level 4, which is what the dragon kind of wants to charge anyway. So
Yeah.
I just think this is not useful tech. This is the tech. I don't know if you listen to the Square Bash podcast, they were talking about a lot of this being like school kids talking about which superhero would beat each other. Like, oh no, because then Superman will just shoot fucking lightning bolts out of his eyes. That shit, and this is what it is. This is the tech that, like, in abstract of all the context of playing a game, seems like it's a good idea, but I just don't think it plays out in a functional way on the tabletop.
So you're saying it should be a level 1 with Walloper's one hit wonder for about 70 points, and that's how we execute this plan.
Well, I thought it was.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
You don't lose
I
your
thought
level
it was
4
a good plan because I thought Spectral Doppelganger was a 24-inch range spell.
Sure, be amazing, man. Yeah.
Yeah, good plan.
But the assailments do add into combat resolution, so it's another way for you to, again, you're probably not killing a dragon even with several assailment spells, but if you are able to get a couple of wounds on it to count for combat resolution, that again gives you a way to potentially win the combat against the dragon. And for at least some of the dragons, your high elves, chaos, wood elves, that can be really good. Of course, for the vampire and Tomb King dragons, they don't actually care. They'll just take possibly no wounds because they're indomitable. And so I think they potentially, some of what we're talking about, breaking a dragon isn't going to work, and we might even not be able to crumble the undead dragons sufficiently well because they can just heal wounds back if they need them.
Do you reckon there's value in trying to chip wounds off before combat with magic, with shooting? Because what they have, Star Dragon has 9 wounds, and I imagine the Chaos Dragon's similar. If you can take off 2 or 3 wounds before combat, suddenly you're less inclined to be charging as recklessly, etc.
Yeah, but you've
Again,
still
I
got to
think
have
you need
something
to-
that does 6 wounds.
Yeah. And you need to make the decision of whether you're killing the dragon or not. And I think a lot of armies just don't have the tech to kill the dragon directly. And so you can chip 2 or 3. So, like, Empire, for example, can easily chip a couple of wounds off with some cannon shots. But they can't then follow that up with anything in close combat, which will actually clear the rest of the wounds.
Didn't we
And
just
so
discuss
what-
that? It's Law of Illusion with the Mace of Hellstrom.
Mace of Hellstrom.
I want to step back to Magic, because if they're
There is some
taking a combat lord on a dragon, we're talking 600-700 points, 500-600 points. There's every chance they're not running a level 4, and if we talk about dragons being potentially ubiquitous, level 4s are even more so. Like, every list I've written has had a level 4 in it. So there's your chance, if you've got that level 4, to actually, you're going to get to cast some spells. So is there some magic that we can use that's going to help with what we've talked about earlier in it slowing the dragon down or putting some pressure on it?
Oh,
Massively.
baby.
So
Oh, baby.
I think Illusion's the best for this. It has
Spectral Doppelganger!
Yes. Yeah. Get the Mace of Hellstrom on a wizard level 2 on a Pegasus and just fly right in there. Done.
the real answer here is Miasmic Mirage, which is it's an 11 to cast with 15-inch range. So it's pretty hard to get off, but decent range. It gives them -2 to their movement, and they can't march or charge.
That is good.
which is very spicy. And like you say, if you don't have a level 4, especially if you don't have a level 4 in range, the chance that you're going to be able to dispel that if it gets cast at 11 plus is exceedingly low. Even on top of that, you've then got a second spell, which is Column of Crystal, which is a 5-inch template, which is impassable terrain, and really importantly, no line of sight can be drawn over it. This is not blocking line of sight like infantry. This is just the dragon can't see through this infinitely higher Column of Crystal. So you've got 2 spells which will stop the dragon from charging, and that can be a massive payoff in terms of denying its utility across the game.
Isn't crystal really valuable because it is see-through?
I'm not engaging with that, Nick. I'm not doing
Actually,
it.
I think I saw a documentary about crystal you can't see through called Dark Crystal.
Oh, yeah, cool. I haven't seen
There was-
that. It's on Disney Plus though, right?
Was
a
there a
good
dragon in that?
Yeah. There's several. I need to let my cat in. I'll be back.
Another way that you can pressure a dragon
More good
with
podcasting
magic.
from Nick Gentili.
So this is like a way to indirectly pressure a dragon. So we were saying before, you can set up units that a dragon can't beat, and you can set up zones that a dragon won't want to go into. But the dragon has agency there; it can choose not to go into that zone. And we can't kill the dragon with our shooting and magic; it's too tough. So then we think, well, it's hopeless. But if you point your shooting not at the dragon, but at other things to pick up some points, then the dragon can't just disengage. It's going to have to go into the zones that you're setting up. So if I'm a dwarf player, for example, I might, and I know I'm playing against a dragon, I might not take a cannon and take an organ gun instead. Organ gun's going to be better at picking up points off other things, even if it's not really going to hurt the dragon so badly. And that then forces the dragon to go into areas it might not want to, and puts the pressure on not the dragon itself, but the dragon player to make a move to break the stalemate, because you're chipping away elsewhere with your magic missiles, the light shooting you've got.
And then you can do what Nick does and just ask your opponent random questions like, what did you have for breakfast? What's that in your hair? Are you wearing cologne? Because as he was saying before, he likes to ask his opponents questions to take their mind off the game. And therefore, he's able to do shifty things on the board to beat them.
And that also takes up a lot of time, so you can wind down their chess clock while they're trying to answer them.
That's what we talked about, right? Is if you only play a four-turn game, and that's 2 turns worth of stuff that the dragon doesn't kill.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, don't cheat.
Cheating is not the answer here.
I mean, it might be the answer, but it's not one that we recommend.
I on Dave's point with magic, because I'm the resident high elf player, I always bring everything back to high elves, because I like to talk about myself and things that I like. I don't know if you've noticed this on our backlog of podcasts, but I think high magic is another good answer for it. With Vors Unmaking, which is just a high elf wizard signature spell, regardless of lore that they take. You can break their magic items that keep them alive, and then you've got things like Walk Between Worlds to make your big block ethereal. You've got Tempest, which slows them down, similar to Column of Crystal. It slows them down, makes their charges more difficult, etc., etc. I don't
think that Tempest works, because it makes the ground dangerous and difficult. But as a flyer, they get to ignore that.
Yeah, so maybe ignore that comment then.
The trick with Column of Crystal is that it explicitly states it can't be seen through.
Yeah, fair. What's the one where it's -2 or 3 leadership? What lore is that?
That's
Necromancy has 2 versions of that. So they have Spirit Leech, which is an 18 inches -2 leadership. And they can't use their Inspiring Presence special rule, so other allies can't benefit from their leadership. And you also have Spiritual Vortex, which is a 12-inch, 5-inch large template, which then within 12 inches of the 5-inch large template, -1 leadership, and you can't use Inspiring Presence.
8 inches, the big template, but same ability.
So not 12. But like the way that spreads out is massive. No. Like it's half the table.
Spiritual Vortex sounds like a pyramid scheme that I was involved in.
Well, that's why
Well, it's
Tomb
interesting
has stealth.
Well, exactly. I used it in my Tomb King's army, and that's one of my solutions for a dragon, or putting pressure on a dragon, is the Casket of Souls combined with some leadership debuff. So you've got things like the Screaming Skull Catapult and those 2 spells from Necromancy, which are excellent spells all the time, let alone against a dragon. But if you can debuff a dragon's leadership, I mean, this is more specific, obviously, but if you can debuff that dragon's leadership and then either beat it in combat, even if it's going to be potentially just falling back in good order, if you're knocking its leadership down by 2 or 3, a spike roll, and it's just going to break anyway. It's going to roll above its leadership. But also the Casket of Souls will do horrendous things to a dragon if you can make it fail the leadership test.
And if you get it to fall back in good order on your turn, right, and then you pursue it with whatever, a crappy unit, a single character, whatever, you're stopping it from moving and charging in its own turn. So you're slowing it down that extra pace. What about Hammerhand? Assailment, 7+. 2d6.
Read the
2d3 strength 4 hits, each with an AP -2.
Read the spell privately, and then think about what you're going to say, and then don't say it. Is what I would say to that.
Imagine you turned your hand into a hammer. That would be a real deterrent to a dragon.
It'd be a real deterrent to a nail.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely not a thing here, Nick. I mean, I just wanted to jump in on the light of death one from Vortex. So with Vamps, I think they can do a really similar list. Which, if you want to play negative Warhammer for a tournament, Vamps can do a really good.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, right. So I've been playing around with Vamp lists, and I think one that could be really good for anti-dragon, but also just generally annoying to play against and probably pretty good, is like you go 2 level 4s, both with Necromancy, because you can cast the same spell by different wizards in the turn.
Oh, have I got a list for that?
Yeah, one of them with the ability to raise dead twice. Then you have a vampire BSB. So all 3 of these can also cast summon raise dead. So they can summon a new zombie unit with their magic spell, and then they can raise more dead into those units. Then you go 2 banshees, 2 terrorgeists, and then 3 units of 25 zombies, 3 units of 25 skeletons, and a corpse cart. And what that means is the dragon basically has the option to charge into one of your massive blocks of undead that you can summon back about 20 models a turn. You can drop its leadership by at least 3 a turn. Then it has to take whale tests at -5, and every point it fails its leadership check, it just loses a wound. And like that, I think, would be really terrifying for dragons, because you've got 4 of these whales, you've got loads of ways to drop their leadership, and then what they're stuck left with is punching champions that come back in skeleton units, or punching zombie units, which can be raised far above their starting strength. So things like that would be very difficult, I think, for Vamps.
Yeah, but how do you transport 4 whales to a Warhammer tournament? I've seen Free Willy, and you have to stop in lots of car washes, and that's for 1 whale.
I mean, the way that display boards are escalating, it won't be too long before someone has their Ideneth Deepkin army in a SeaWorld tank. So this is coming.
At least you know you're going to have a whale of a time, though.
I was waiting for it.
What am I doing with my life?
I ask myself this every time we have Nick on the show. Jabe wanted to do an episode with 6 people, including Nick.
We wouldn't fit on the screen. Oh, can you do these boxes in 6 boxes?
Yes.
It's the internet.
Anything's possible on the internet. So, in summary, we have avoid it and kill the rest of the army.
Yeah.
Bog it down or slow it down, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, and potentially threaten it on combat resolution.
And Spectral Doppelganger with a big weapon.
Yeah.
Combat res, and then there's the small numbers of things that have specific anti-dragon tech that can kill it. Heroic Killing Blow, Light of Death from Tomb Kings, vampire whales. There's not others that I've picked up massively. I'm not sure if others have noticed anything that can kill
There's
it.
a couple of things, but it's about if you've got. You're never going to have a whole army that's going to be able to kill the dragon. Like, not every unit in your army is going to go toe to toe with the dragon,
No.
but it's about using what you've got, using that that one unit that you've got to try and put that pressure on the dragon so that it can't just clean sweep through your whole army, right? It's pushing it to one side and making it have those bad decisions so that they can't just optimally charge into whatever the hell they want. Because if you can do that and you can slow it down and then use your other stuff, your other units, or even that unit that you're bullying the dragon with, you can push that unit up to scare the dragon away and then push it into the rest of their army potentially. If you can do that, or use your spells to make it have those bad choices, then you're gonna find a little bit of success. And success isn't gonna be 20-0ing the dragon player, because it's so difficult, because the dragon is worth so many points and they're so hard to get. But success might be losing 11-9 instead of losing 15-5.
Yeah.
Success might also be turning a 12-8 loss into a 12-8 or a 13-7 win. And that 5 battle points over the course of a 6-game event is very important. It will move you 2 or 3 places up the rankings at the end of an event if you can gain 5 points from that one dragon matchup that you've got. And if you play against 5 dragons, that's 25 points.
It's also something we haven't mentioned as well, is that dragons, once they're pointed in a direction, they go really well, but they're not great at turning compared to how they used to be. You have to measure out your wheels. You only get a free pivot if you don't march. So dragons don't love turning sideways, which means that you can potentially take advantage of that. Nick was saying before, get the dragon to go one direction, then go, send your army the other way. They're pretty mobile, but they used to just be able to go 20 inches and reform and wherever they went. And they have bigger bases now as well. So I think they're not as easy to get to where they want to be. And so if you're able to reduce the number of places where the dragon wants to be or feels comfortable, then you'll have, I guess, more agency than it might seem at first.
Yeah. And something we haven't even talked about that goes into slowing it down. I'm like, why haven't we talked about this? Flee is a charge reaction, just with everything.
Yeah.
If the dragon is charging you from a long way away, and the only options you've given it are things that have room behind them to flee and rally, don't be afraid to just flee as a charge reaction. And
because you rally automatically, right?
No, not from flee.
No, that's from
you rally automatically from fall back in good order, which is what panic does if you're more than half of your unit strength. But lots of generals also have stand your ground. They give you a second chance to rally a flee. Rallying cry, that's it. Yeah.
But yeah, so if you can get your units, like I said before, don't just run at the dragon and let it charge your army turn 1. But if you can get sufficiently far onto the board that you're not worried about your unit just fleeing off the board immediately, particularly if a dragon is coming down a flank, if it's coming down a flank and you've got that room to flee away from it into open board space, and you can protect the area behind your army, you can just kind of fold your flank in away from the dragon by fleeing as a charge reaction, and that will really slow the dragon down. It's not going to kill it that way, but it's going to potentially mean it only kills 200-300 points worth of your stuff by the end of the game.
And that's the point, right? Is that it's a tempo piece. It needs to be gaining that advantage consistently across the game, or it's going to be a waste of points.
As long as you pressure their army. If you don't pressure their army and the dragon gets 300 points, you've just lost by 300 points. But if you can pressure, if you create that points differential of okay, it's dealing with 200 points of your army, but you're dealing with the rest of their army on yours, or you're chipping away with, like Chris said, you're chipping away with magic because you've got a magic advantage, or chipping away with shooting because you've got a shooting advantage, like that kind of stuff. That's where if you reduce the efficiency of the dragon, you can get those points back.
And you need to have that plan worked out before you turn up to the table, because not all armies at all can do these different strategies. If you're running Beastmen MSU, you're not going to win on combat res. And if you're running dwarves, you're going to really struggle to go and get points off the rest of their army if it's their dragon punching thing. So you need to work out, I am going to come up against a dragon in this tournament. Which of these strategies am I going to adopt to try and win or lose small rather than getting absolutely trounced?
Yeah. And when you think about this, and this is why we talked about it at the start, think about you're playing against the best of the dragons, the top tier dragons. Think about it is a star dragon with a 2+, 5+, or it's
4
the chaos
legs,
dragon,
hind legs, tail.
Yeah,
wings.
the chaos dragon, which has 2 heads, but also has the always strike last ability on it, so that even if you charge your mage in there with the Mace of Hellstrom, well, too bad, you strike last, you are going to die. Think of these like top tier units that you're going to face up, because if you don't consider those ones, you go, oh, well, I can deal with a Wyvern. It's like, whatever. Yeah, you probably can deal with a Wyvern, but a Wyvern's only going to be 300 points. So creating that points differential with a Wyvern is a lot harder. But, think about it against the top tier stuff.
Good plan. Good plan.
All right. Well, if no one's got anything else to add, I think we've covered some options. I think there's things out there that you can do, as Nick so eloquently put it. You no longer need to panic at the sight of a dragon. You have these strategies.
You will need to take a terror test, though.
You will need to take a terror test.
Well,
Yeah.
the one thing is that we didn't discuss as we're winding up this episode is you can just plan to dodge it in the matchups.
Yeah, I was just going to say that before too.
just plan to hopefully not face a dragon.
Lose your first game 20-0 and hope that you don't play against the guy who just charged his dragon into Chris's army and got 20-0.
Yeah. I am so keen to see what the tournaments are going to look like, because I reckon for the first year we're going to have 40% of armies are rocking a dragon or something like that, because they're just such an obvious choice.
40%
I think
with
that
dragons,
probably
40% with level 4s, and 20% with level 4s on dragons.
Yeah.
I think the level 4 percentages might be right, but I think a lot of people just won't take dragons because people play the armies they've got. There'll be loads of people still playing dwarfs and beastmen and lizardmen and won't have dragons.
Chris, this is not the early 2000s. We're not playing 6th edition. Epson inkjet printer go brrr. Everyone has dragons, bro.
Also, one of the only 2 armies that you can buy, one of the only boxes you can get for it, comes with a bloody dragon in it.
Does it have wings? Is it actually a dragon?
Oh my god.
Yes, it has wings.
It's more of a giant lizard from the pictures I've seen.
It has wings.
Yeah.
And Hohen's is a big dung beetle.
That's not a very nice thing to say.
It's a scarab construct.
Isn't a scarab just a Egyptian dung beetle?
Sure.
This is above our pay grade. So in the
you've
meantime,
offended an entire nation.
Until we decide to restrict characters to 500 points per army, I think these are your options.
I want to leave everyone with a thought. We've spent an hour and 12 minutes, an hour and 13, just ticking over, talking about what to do if you're sitting across from a player with a dragon. So what do you do if it's Nick Gentili and he's got 2 dragons and they both have 5+ regens, and one of them has a 5+ ward and one of them's got, and the other one's got a 2+ armor? Because turns out high elves can take 2-star dragons, and so now everything we talked about zone out the dragon, bully the dragon, now there's 2 of them. Think about that and don't fail your strength test.